A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. So, he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. By thoughts, I mean specifically chatter in the skull, perpetual and compulsive repetition of words, of reckoning and calculating. I'm not saying that thinking is bad. Like everything else, is useful in moderation. A good servant, but a bad master. And all so-called civilized peoples have increasingly become crazy and self-destructive because through excessive thinking they have...
Stop thinking, worrying, wondering, doubting, fearing, hurting, doubting, worrying, thinking, worrying, thinking. Stop it and just do!
Yeah, I think overthinking can get kind of typecast as like this like navel gazing thing, right? So like so instead of like actually just appreciating a thing for what it is, that you just kind of like go into the ether with your mind like ad infinitum. And I think there's a degree of legitimacy to that. Like you certainly don't want to be like so in your own head that you can't actually be present. But there's also a part of me that thinks that overthinking is becoming more present, right? That is doing like the hard work of trying to understand what being is, you know, like knowing what makes a thing tick or why we enjoy something that we enjoy, right? So I don't look at someone who's a coffee aficionado who's taken the time to really invest themselves and enjoying the craft of coffee making in a negative light at all. I think what he sees in kind of sipping a cup of joe probably is actually more delightful to him than when he initially started. You know, I think that process of discovery and uncovering is just something that we're kind of designed to do. I think it's in our human nature because I think that we're designed to look for that delight as we discover and experience things, right? So yeah, I think interest and overthinking, if we redefine that as thinking deeply, right, or wanting to invest yourself in thinking in something, I think it has value so long as that thing that you're investing in is significant, right? Like at the end of the day, if I'm overthinking about something that's of little value, that's what makes overthinking bad. Not the act of overthinking. I think it's fine to think deeply about all sorts of things, but it's really a question of whether or not that thing is something that's worth thinking deeply about, right? I like to think of my thoughts almost like currency. I spend it on things that I value, right? So you could tell a lot about what a person values based on what they spend time thinking about, right? And so for me, like things like my faith, right, and the God that I believe in, then colors kind of the way that I think and delight in other things around me, right? And so in light of those things, I'm happy to delight in even menial things, because for me, it's connected to the good design of a creator, right? So I believe that God created me for delight. I believe he sent his son to fix what's broken in the world, right? So as a Christian, that allows me to enjoy Coca-Cola, right? And I'm happy to think deeply about that, and yet know that that at the end of the day, Coke is Coke, right? There's only so much like goodness I could derive from that, right? If I'm not able to connect that thought and that delight into something deeper, then I'm going to be left kind of wanting, right? And so I think that's where people find overthinking to be a negative thing, is that they might try to search for depth within something that they enjoy, and they end up kind of hitting the bottom of the barrel of it, right? To which I would say, yeah, like if you keep going at that point, it's kind of like clawing at nothing, and that's probably not good for anybody. But if there is something of intrinsic value there, I think it's absolutely worth digging into. And I find that those people tend to see aspects of what's happening in a way that's beautiful in its own way. It's a different kind of discovery. It's another angle and another dimension of looking at things that helps them appreciate it. And so in light of that, I want to glean as much from those people and their specialty and their craftsmanship as I can. And so cheers to navel gazers. Yeah.
The first thought is to go past the idea of the block and think about what's the cause of the block. And the block is usually something like, it's either a personal, I'm not good enough. It can be a confidence issue. I don't have anything to say. Or it could be a thinking about someone else. Nobody's going to like what I make. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's either a self-judgment or fear of outside judgment. So if you're making something with a freedom of, this is something I'm making for myself for now, that's all it is. It's a diary entry. Everything I make is a diary entry. The beauty of a diary entry is I can write my diary entry and you can't tell me my diary entry wasn't good enough or that's not what I experienced. Of course it's what I experienced. I'm writing a personal diary for myself. No one else can judge it. It is my experience of my life. Everything we make can be that, can be a personal reflection of who we are in that moment of time. It doesn't have to be the greatest you could ever do. It doesn't have to have any expectation that it's going to change the world. It doesn't have to be, this has to sell a certain number of copies for any reason. It doesn't have any of those things. All it is I'm making this thing. I'm making this thing for me, and I want to do it to the best of my ability to where I feel good about it and where it's honest. It's honest of where I'm at. And if you're living in this world of just being honest to where you're at, there's nothing blocking that. Do you know what I'm saying? There are no blocks. The blocks are all based on dealing with a different force or a different perception that is made up. You know, you make up this story and you're living the story. I'm in this block because I just can't do it. The reason you can't do it is because you're afraid someone else is not going to like it, or there are no blocks. There's infinite amount of information out there to work with because it also doesn't stem from us. So we're vehicles for this information and it's coming through us all the time. So if you don't have an idea when you're sitting at your desk, if you go for a walk, chances are you'll see something that'll spark something in you as a seed to take off from.